This house behind me here is Trenchard's Farm. It's the temporary home of an American professor, David Sumner, and his wife, Amy. They've come over to Britain and come to Cornwall, where they find themselves faced with the perhaps justifiable hostility that Cornish people always are credited to have towards foreigners. At least that's the story of this. They try to interfere with what the local Cornish regard as their affair. Well, the local Cornish people take the law into their own hands. Hence the title of the book, The Siege of Trenchard's Farm. The Straw Dogs is based on the highly successful Peckinpah. Earlier today I spoke to him and to Susan George. First, Sam Peckinpah. Almost based. The West Country people are portrayed as being very insular and inward-looking and inbred. Is this how you found?
Well, I've found insular and inbred people all over the world. I certainly wouldn't confine them to the West Country, as you say. I've certainly found them in the South, in the West, in Nevada, Arizona. Some of my own family, I think, fit very well in some of the characters here. We're all a bit inbred.
Gordon Williams, who wrote the book upon which this film is based, has complained publicly that the film is nothing like the book. How do you answer, as a director, criticisms like that?
I think Mr. Williams has a penchant for his own work. I don't.
You haven't had exactly the best kind of weather, certainly not today. Would you come back to Cornwall to make another picture?
No, I intend to come back here to live. I leased a house here.
Maybe elsewhere?
Just down the road about 2.5 miles.
Will you be living here very much, or?
I hope so. I like it here very much.
Well, maybe welcome you to the West Country, Mr. Peckinpah.
I adore it. I like it. I even like the weather.
Thank you very much.
Despite the fact that I almost died of pneumonia here, I become acclimated now, so you can't get rid of me.
Thank you very much. The Hollywood may be over, but even on location in Cornwall, the star still gets a chair with his name on the back. I mean, it's very rough here today. It's misty. It's cold.
Well, as far as it is cold. It's a little warmer for me than I would be if I were in New York now, because they're having the coldest winter they've ever had in a long time. It's about 0 degrees with a lot of snow. So I feel that this is a reprieve for me. But
I've got to break it up because they're waiting for Dustin.
Oh, you're waiting to shoot. Well, I'm sorry. Maybe we can talk to you in a little while. Thank you. Thank you.
I was on it.
Sorry, sir.
That's okay.
Back to the car now.
All right. Wait a minute. I got to get my glasses.
Well, hang on.
Okay. Our program, we had a young actress who maintained that in order to get on these days, you just had to take your clothes off in films. Now, you, I think, have a very different view of that.
I don't think it's true. There are stipulations one makes all the time about when and why, if there's a good reason. But I don't think one has to take their clothes off. I think you have to be a good actress. No, I'm not saying you have to be a good actress, because I suppose people have done it without, but I don't think it's got anything to do with taking your clothes off. I will not sign that bit of paper that says I won't do any films where I don't have to take my clothes off. I mean, I don't like doing it. I don't like nude scenes. I have only ever done one which was comparatively nude, and that was only a back shot of me, and that was when I was 17. I feel I was much less inhibited then than I am now. And so now it means more to me than it did then. I don't particularly like the idea, but it depends where and when, as I said.
Artificial mist, and yet you can't see more than about 200 yards for the real thing. Still, I suppose that's show business. At least it's movie making. Men here on this film at the moment. Perhaps the best known of them, there in the centre, Billy Cornelius, who received all those cuts and abrasions on his face a little while ago, demonstrating just how easy it was to get knocked down by a car. Dustin Hoffman again for another couple of moments. Dustin, you really epitomise the young actor of the 1970s. How sort of sensitive are you to this? How obvious does this seem to you?
It seemed only obvious, I guess, after The Graduate, because the part I played was of a young man. And since then, it seems less obvious to me the more I work and the older I get. Right now, I'm almost 34, so I don't feel that I represent the youth.
You had your wife and children over here.
They're still here. Yes.
How are they liking it?
Fine, very much so. I just wish that we could put we have a girl that's almost 5 and a baby that's 4 months. It would have been nice to put the 5-year-old in school, but we couldn't because of the short time.
Into an English school?
Yes, sure.
Would you really like that?
She likes children, just it's best for her if she's with other children.
Dustin, you are a family man. How much of an interruption is it coming out on occasion like this to normal family life?
Well, it's been our biggest problem in marriage, and my family's come with me every film I've done. And unfortunately today, it's not like in the old days where you did everything on the set, in the studio. Today, location is location. You go where the film takes place, and we've been gypsies. We haven't solved that problem at all. That's the...
Hoffman, up the set, please. And Susan, George, urgently. Lights going. Need them. Over.
My company, Town Associates, we'd acquired the book Siege of Trench's Farm, and what I loved about it was the premise and the last sequence, the idea of people without martial arts skills defending their home and turf against the hooligans. And I had worked with Sam Peckinpah before on some television specials that I had done, and asked him if he would. I called and I said, "Would you like to direct this, adapt and direct it?" He wasn't available for adaptation; he was doing something. But I said, "Would you like to direct it?" And he said, "I'd love to, but I should tell you that I'm blacklisted. You may not want to use me." And I said, "It's all the more reason I do want to use you." And I had asked David Z. Goodman, who I had worked with before, to do the adaptation, and then he and Sam did the final shooting polish together, with a big contribution from Dustin. And it kind of, I guess it took a while for me to get it set up because the sine qua non was getting a known actor, and Dustin had only done 1 or 2 pictures before then. The first picture was The Graduate, which made him an overnight star, and it took me a long time. Sam and I met with him in New York, where I was living at the time. Then Sam had to go back to California, and I had countless meetings with Dustin because he's very careful about what he does. And finally, he was persuaded, and we just set off, did a long prep in England, during which time we went crazy finding the right locations. As a matter of fact, Sam and I divided the UK, and I went to one part of the country and he went to the other. Actually, he went as far as Scotland, and he found a location there that he loved. And I flew down to it, but it wasn't practical. And I, meanwhile, came across St. Ives, which I thought was this marvelous small English fishing village, and quaint beyond the word quaint, until I wandered in it the first day, turned a corner, and there was Hepworth sculpture. It turned out there were major international known artists who were living there. But anyway, we scouted it. Sam came down. We found the specific locations, and then actually shot in a little village outside St. Ives called St. Buryan's, which consisted of one street and a few pubs. And that was it. We never had a title we liked. We know we didn't like Caesar Trench's Farm, because nobody knew what Trench's Farm meant or was. And as any time you have to change a title or find a title, it's always horrendous. And finally, I organized a contest among the cast and the crew and anybody who, the waiters in the hotel, saying anybody who can come up with a title, we had some kind of prize for. And actually it was one of the crew, one of Sam's old friends, who came up with the title, which is a quote from Lao Tse, and it has no particular meaning, but it just sounded, it's so ambiguous that you can only read anything into it. And it also gave us a real key for the artwork and everything else. And so it's hard to remember that a picture was ever called anything but Straw Dogs. The idea, it was at a time where the dilemma of the lead character, played by Dustin Hoffman, of David, confronting the violence in America after Martin Luther King's assassination and Bobby Kennedy's. It was a time where we all felt so strongly about violence, and it was the opportunity to, while providing excitement and entertainment, to make a statement about, be able to make an anti-violence vehicle was particularly interesting to all of us, particularly to me. It was always a problem in Sam's later years, even when I'd worked with him earlier, and he always vowed that he was stopped drinking and he was only drinking wine and he was not going to drink anything by the shoot. And he did go on shooting, and at one point I remember drinking rather during the shooting, and I remember one point saying to him I would have to replace him if he kept on drinking, and he said, "You wouldn't do that, you're my friend." And I said, "It's because I'm my friend, I'm your friend, I would do it." And at one point he got sick, not from drinking, he got some kind of upper respiratory infection, and we had to put him in the hospital for a couple of days. So there was a rumor that we had to be hospitalized because of drinking, but he had some form of walking pneumonia. But he always had a thermos of coffee, next to him as he was shooting. And every time I walked by, he would offer me coffee and make me have a drink with him, because I knew that as soon as I walked away, there was a switched thermos, and there was a little brandy probably in his coffee, but we didn't lose any time because of it. There was some agitation, probably, as I would think as I reconstructed, from the distributor and the insurance company, the film bonding company, because once he was sick, nobody knew how long it would take to get better. So there was an agitation, and Peter Yates' name came up because he was a terribly talented guy whose work we all knew. Actually, there was one other thing that I did, which was I'm not proud of, was somewhat manipulative. As we lost a couple of days, there was a director in London who was not a terribly admired man, but somebody that the film bonding company would use if they ever had to take over a picture. And at one point, as we lost a couple of days, and I knew I had to fend off the authorities, the people putting up the money, I hired an actor who's not recognizable to come down and stand on the set. And Sam a couple of times said, "Who's that fellow?" And I, "Don't worry about it." And by the third time when he said, "Sam," at the end of the day I said to him, "I guess I have to tell you, there's a real worry about our going over, and this is a director that they'll hire to replace us." And suddenly we picked up speed. He discussed things only generally, and then waited to see on film what he wanted. And, within the parameters of his intelligence, that's where I felt he did provoke a performance. And there was not a lot of intellectualization, but Sam didn't do that with actors, although we indulged ourselves more. But I think Sam was always a little bit embarrassed at how intelligent he was. He was really quite intelligent, very intelligent, and very well educated. But I think the myth of Sam is the last man with guts and integrity in the film business, and the last man with the pure American Western ethic, was something that he kind of got caught up in. Actually, he came from a long family of judges and was very, very well educated. Dustin Hoffman is an enormously creative and internal actor, and the contributions were, all through the film, less in the actual writing than in moments of dynamic playing. And also, very often there was the moments in dialogue that any good actor makes his own. He has to state in his own vernacular. And Dustin was particularly creative and inventive. We had difficulty working with, Dustin had difficulty working with Sam because Dustin is one of the great internal so-called method actors, and everything must have a rationale, and there must be real reason for every piece of behavior. And Sam works very intuitively and is less articulate, and I always felt that Sam, as his directing technique, rather than verbally eliciting a performance would provoke a performance. And so it took Dustin a while to get used to that way of working, because he was used to discussing everything at length. But finally, everybody found a way to accommodate each other. He was so right for it that I frankly don't know where I would have gone as an alternative. Perhaps Al Pacino, because of a quality of honesty and his size, frankly. But Dustin was somebody who I had admired so and was so anxious to work with that he was the only real choice. What had happened, and I don't know that it was ever planned, because we shot in continuity, the film was shot as the story unfolded, really, and that's not very usual. But in the very beginning, Dustin and Susan George bonded very, very well. They really liked each other very, very much. And as the film went on, and I don't know that it was conscious, I don't know that Sam provoked it, but I know that as their relationship as husband and wife deteriorated in the story, Dustin started relating to Susan George, and Sam started relating to her as the husband was relating to the wife. And at one point, I just thought it was so mean that I remember going and seeing Sam, taking him aside and saying, "You can't do this, this is inhuman." And I think in his most poetic sense, he told me to piss off. He's getting the performance he wants. But I felt very badly that Susan, I think, was victimized by it, although I think it probably contributed to a wonderful performance.
I remember the very first memory I have of Sam Peckinpah was blue eyes, piercing blue eyes, and very, very confrontational. That's the very first thing I remember about him. He was direct. There was a kindness to him that I thought was instantly recognizable, but there was also an aura around him, whether that was something I'd been told or something I felt, I don't know, but it was a pressure meeting him. I remember that. It was quite terrifying. And he was lovely to me, but as I say, very confrontational, and we seemed to get on very well. International stars were not something that you met on an everyday basis or knew or came to know. So I didn't really know very much about Dustin Hoffman, apart from the fact that I had seen The Graduate, which I thought he was absolutely sensational in. And I thought he was incredibly sexy and a gorgeous guy. And so I really looked forward to meeting him. I remember initially, my gut feeling as I met him was that he was tiny. I couldn't get over how small he was. I thought he was some sort of huge hunk, but he was quite petite. I was terrified when meeting him, but he was a really sweet man with a huge sense of humor that was evident immediately. Sparkle, twinkle in his eyes, completely, disarming, slightly disarming. Loved that. He loved that. He loved to be disarming, and he knew he was. He would take you on, and his intention was to make you feel disarmed, and he did it very well, and I loved it. I responded to that, and I enjoyed it. And it was the same thing all the way through the movie. We had a fantastic relationship within the movie, the same thing, from emotional turmoil and sometimes huge sparks and incredible chemistry, which is what it needed to make this film work, to mammoth laughter of huge proportions that went on for days, which he instigated and I responded to. 3 grown men, Dan Melnick, Sam Peckinpah, and Dustin Hoffman, I realized is what it was, all having a heated discussion. So I hovered in the doorway. They paid no attention to me whatsoever, and they continued with this bout. I stood there for a few seconds, and I thought, they don't know I'm here. In my head, I went, they don't know I'm here. So I went back out the door, and as I did, I dropped my eyeline. And as I dropped my eyeline, I realized that these 3 men were standing with their trousers around their ankles. absolutely naked, trousers round their ankles. And I looked down and I thought, oh God. And I looked up again and these three men burst into extraordinary laughter and looked at me and said, welcome, Amy. Dustin and I had a very different work ethic. That was painfully obvious from the moment that we started working together. But it was fantastic, and that was part of the extreme different way that we worked, was part of the magical chemistry, I think, that came together and ignited and made this fantastic energy between these two individuals. Because he was most certainly a method actor. He always had been. He told everyone, he still is. You know, that's the way he works. He's a method actor. I respect that 1,000%. It's wonderful. But I am not. I'm instinctive. Everything I do is natural, is the first thing I think of. It just is, I'm instinctive. He's method. Two totally extreme different ways of working. And that was a major confrontation to begin with he and I, but a wonderful one, as I say, that worked in the chemistry of the film and made, I think, such an energy between the two of us and made the sparks fly and made from hilarity to tears to emotion, you know, the extremeness of the way we worked came out in our almost realistic lifestyles with each other on camera, which was great for the film. And I think Peckinpah knew that. He was so smart. He was a genius in his own time. And I think he was so smart that he absolutely would have known that these two different human beings would have been such an interesting mesh. And Peckinpah then, after the weeks of rehearsal, when we were really working well together, he then made another major decision, which at the time, at 20 years of age, I found a little personal, a little encroaching into my personal space, because I had a boyfriend who loved me very dearly, and I did him too, and we were about to get engaged. And suddenly Peckinpah announced that he wanted me to leave by train for Cornwall with Dustin and the writer, David Z. Goodman, and he wanted me to spend the first 2 weeks in Cornwall, apart from my boyfriend, and to live with Dustin, not in the same bed or the same bedroom, but to live in the same hotel, to spend every hour with him that I had. And it was so clever, because it was this relationship in Straw Dog at the beginning of the movie starts with a marriage that's on the rocks, about to disintegrate. And without the pre-knowledge of how these people had got on in their existing lives together, if we didn't know how they came to, how this fallout became and how uncomfortable they had become with one another, if we never knew how comfortable they once were, if that makes sense, there was nothing to build on this relationship. So we had to form a really fantastic relationship, Dustin and I, and then we had to break it down before the film started.
The chief censor was a lovely gentleman named Sir John Trevelyan, I believe. And when we had gotten a print close to our release print, I remember going back and standing over the moviola, the film equipment, with Sir John and a man named, I think, Stephen Murphy, who was an associate of his, running the rape scene, those few moments of one sequence, to convince him that what we were looking at, what he was looking at and worried about in the rape scene was rear entry and not sodomy. One is acceptable, sodomy is not. And so that was a very ludicrous scene. And finally, we did get released initially in London and caused enormous controversy. And then I think the film was pulled after that.
It's a really long story as to whether I walked off the movie or I didn't. I did, most definitely. Sam would not discuss the specifics with me. He kept skirting around it all the time, and I kept asking Dan Melnick all the time, somebody has to at some point tell me exactly what is required of me so that I can at least have time to go home and think about it, and think about what I am what I'm able to do, and if indeed there's anything that I'm not able to do, so that I can discuss with the makers of this movie how to get round anything that I think is too uncomfortable for me. I could never get that answer. Nobody wanted to answer that question until the day the rape scene was literally, excuse the pun, on top of us. And I asked these questions of Sam, and the answer was that he wasn't prepared to give me definition of what he required. I would just have to wing it all on the day, and which I said I'm not prepared to do. I need to know, because I was frightened. I mean, I was obviously frightened. Yes, I'd committed to do this film. I'd read the script through and through and through. I'd gone to all these auditions. I knew what was required in terms of a rape scene, but that's really all it said. It never went into the specifics on paper. So I needed to know what was required of me, as anybody would. And they were not prepared. He was not prepared to give me that. And it did come to blows. And I did walk out, and I did say if he wasn't prepared to tell me what I was going to shoot, he actually, he gave me some rough notion on that day, and the rough notion was extremely rough, and I didn't like what I heard at all. And I wouldn't have been prepared to do what he asked me to do. So I said, on the basis of what you've just asked, find yourself another Amy. And I walked out. That caused huge upheaval, as you can imagine. And to cut a very, very long story short, there came a time when he had to come back to the table and discuss with me legitimately what he was intending to do and how we could, it was just a grown-up meeting, how we're going to do this. We together, Sam and I, and Del Henney. How we're going to make it work, how we're going to make it, And one thing he did say to me was he wanted it to be the best rape scene that had ever been shot. And the one thing that I said to him in return is, I would like to achieve that for you, and I will endeavor to do so, but on my terms.
People have commented, asked about Sam's violence and have accused it of being almost pornographic. I would disagree, and I would probably say that pornography is in the eye of the beholder. I think to the degree that it's so powerful, so viscerally affecting, people have made that comment, but I think it's balderdash. Whatever balderdash is. I think it's nonsense. The one thing other than the title that hadn't been resolved before we actually started shooting were the very last moments in the film. And it was, in retrospect, quite wonderful and stimulating because whenever there was any downtime, Sam and I, and then Sam, Dustin and I, and Sam and David Goodman, the writer, and I would discuss alternative endings, not changing the substance at all, really the very last moment. And actually, it came, I'd love to say that we all had a creative flash, but it was actually while Sam was shooting the last moments of the film, where Dustin Hoffman drives off with Susan George and David Warner in the car, and David Warner said, and it was to be originally the last line in the film, "I don't know my way home," and Dustin ad-libbed, "Neither do I." And the moment we all heard it, we knew that we had a powerful last beat. Well, I think the reason, people have asked why it is still so powerful, and I think it is because its intensity is so honest, and it's so easy to identify with the principal actor, with Dustin's character, because when you first see him, and you see him reacting, come to this little village because of the violence in America, the death of Martin King and the death of Robert Kennedy, you feel when you first see him interacting with the town locals, the bullies in the town, that he may be a coward. Or first you think really that he's a pacifist. And then as he continues to be provoked, you feel, well, maybe he's a coward. And then by the end of the picture, you realize that what he fears the most is the violence within himself.